Hey, welcome to an on-the-road version of the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. Today, Southeast California. Yeah, on my quest for blue skies and dry ground, and got plenty of that, as well as some gale force winds you've probably heard about. Well, by now it's history, but the big fires down in Southern California, we're on the east side, so we're not getting it near as bad, and there are no fires here, but still quite exciting for everybody in the state. Speaking of exciting, you have a great day in store for you listening right here. If you're a Flushing dog fan, well, if you're a fan of bird dogs at all, we've got Todd Agnew of Craney Hill Kennels, one of the top 5 dog trainers in the South, according to Garden and Gun magazine. This guy knows field trials, dog training, bird hunting. He'll have some tips for all of us in that regard. Our Fix It segment this week, keep your traveling dog a little drier. And we all join in on one of my pet peeves. Yeah, if you've ever found an empty shell on the ground during a hunt or even a hike, well, we're going to share some of your thoughts on that. You'll also get a chance to get in on the drawing for the Fur Feathers Friends prize number 1, Sage and Breaker Shotgun Cleaning Mat with our word of the week. So stand by for all of that, made possible by Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, Pointer Shotguns, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, True Lock Choke Tubes, MidwayUSA.com, and Purina Pro Plan Sport. Well, as I said, looking for good weather and interesting hunting, and I'm getting both of those, like I said, down in Southeast California, where the birds are scattered, but they are there. Having some good luck on valley quail today. Gave Flick a much-needed rest. The guy's been hunting 5 of the last 7 days, and boy, is he tuckered out. I'm watching him now. We're in the Upland Nation travel trailer, camped on the eastern Sierra slopes, and he's a little sore-footed and a lot tired. So's his owner, now that I think about it. But at least we do have blue sky and dry ground. Ironically, so far on the trip, the best day has been one that was following a light overnight snowfall. We'll talk more about that in the Fix It segment. For right now, though, Flick is doing a great job. We are having a good time. And boy, I'll tell you, I'm learning a lot about valley quail habitat. I thought I knew them pretty well, but man, it's different out here on the Mojave Desert. All right. How about you? Speaking of different, I asked a question on social media a while back. I put up an image of 3 or 4 empty shells on the ground, and I said, here's my pet peeve. But I should also thank all the litter bugs who just clued me into their honey hole. And a lot of people I brought this up to never thought about it that way. And now they do. And I thought it would be an interesting exercise to ask you all what your pet peeves are. And next time I do that, I'll have to remember not to put my pet peeve in the image, because that's really what it got down to. Michael Gugino says, yeah, that's another reason I like hunting with a double. I never lose spent shells, never have to go looking for them. Absolutely. Bryce Cousin says, that's the reason I use extractors on my side-by-sides. They go right into my bag and not the ground. Robert Murphy, good on you. One of the areas you hunt, you bring home pocketfuls of shells. I remember walking around a dove hunting pond a long time ago. I had real GI cargo pants, those really big billowy pockets. By the time I got around that pond, I didn't have room for any more in there. Thanks for that tip. Jake Notner says he always tries to walk out with more than I've shot. Yeah, I get it all the way. Keep up the good work. Joe Rundell says this is a true story. Once had a dog that would retrieve a bird, then snoop around and find the empty shell. I believe it. If our dogs can swing around and pinch a running pheasant, or if they can tell the difference between a hen and a rooster, why not? John Hyde even carries a small garbage bag in his vest for stuff like this. Our friends at one of the organizations, well, I'll remember it as soon as I sign off, they're encouraging that as well, and they'll give you the bag for that. Ryan Stockton says, shells, sure, but my favorite pet peeve, I'm presuming, Ryan, is the shock or the sock, the shirt sleeve, etc., that you find in the wild. Yeah, I get it. Gary Stapleton, well, yes, on my show, we pick up more than we drop. But he says, I've never seen any hunting show where they were hunting with pumps or autos where the shooter ever picked up the shells. Yeah, it's so true. Absolutely right. Maybe you ought to, send that producer or that show host a little polite suggestion. Just saying. All right, that part of the show brought to you by PointerShotguns.com. Lots and lots of small gauge guns in stock and going out to dealers every day. Whether it's a side-by-side, over and under, or any other configuration, they've got the sub-gauges at PointerShotguns.com. Remember, the best over and under for less than $500, according to the guys at Target Focus Life, it's the Pointer Acreus. Learn more and find a dealer, and then rush right down there, pick up your new upgraded shotgun at PointerShotguns.com. And using, all sorts of great MidwayUSA.com products on this trip down to blue sky and dry ground. From MidwayUSA.com, got a lot of non-toxic ammo. That's what we're shooting down here. You don't have many choices in that, but you have plenty of choices for your preferences, gauges, shot sizes, and even the type of metal in the shot. It's all at MidwayUSA.com. Remember, if you sign up for emails or text, you'll get 10% off your next order. There's always something going on there in the way of a special promotion. And, of course, my exclusive series of videos on dog training. It's all available at MidwayUSA.com. Well, it's been way too long since he's been on the podcast. This guy is named one of the 5 best gun dog trainers in the South by my friends at Garden and Gun Magazine. A well-deserved recognition. The guy's got an incredible record in field trials, hunting dog training, and we're going to talk about all of that and a little bit more, particularly with an emphasis on spaniels. Todd Agnew of Craney Hill Kennels, welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
I'm sitting here in beautiful weather. Yours is less than crappy, better than crappy, which is probably par for the course this time of year. A lot of folks who are listening don't know much about you. Why don't you give us a little bit of your story and accomplishments before we get into the more technical stuff?
Pretty common story. Grew up with dogs and wanted to get more involved with dogs and thought I knew about dogs, and then had to realize I didn't know much, and just put the time in and got more and more dogs, and quit my paying job and got more and more dogs, and had to pay for more and more dogs, so now it's a business. It's a pretty basic story.
I see a trend here.
Yeah. I think anyone that's been in the business for a bit, probably doesn't vary too much from that type of story.
But you make it sound almost as if it was inevitable. I mean, was there a tipping point when you said, I'm going to try and make a go of this as a dog trainer?
I think, just in life, you grow up a certain way, and You think you know things, and as you get older, things that you thought were important maybe aren't as important, and other things become more important. I don't think that's an uncommon story. And when you're young, we all think we're going to conquer the world, and we want to conquer the world. And I think it's commonplace for many people when they start to have some mode of success, whatever that is, and what they do. It affords them the luxury of kind of self-reflecting and, do I really want to do this for the next 40 years? And for me, I didn't. It was great for the bank account, but it wasn't great for me getting up every day. Well, this isn't great for the bank account, but I have no problems getting up every day. So I think, I think a lot of old timers will say, find your passion and go for it. And it's much easier to get up in the morning if it's your passion.
You use the term passion. Before that, you used the term important to you. What is it about dog training and trialing and all the related stuff that really trips your trigger, that gets you up in the morning?
Well, it's only the dogs.
Yeah.
All the other stuff is fluff.
Yeah.
Okay. And, as I tease the people we work with, I hope we're friends. I hope we get along, but I only care about your dog. Okay. And I mean that. I really do. I mean, I'm going to do what I think is best for the dog, and we're going to talk about it. And I think that's what I get paid to do. And then you can choose to follow that course or not. But I'm not going to do anything that I don't think is in the dog's best interest. That, being said, education's a big part of it. With people, it's very easy in our position to blame the owner for everything, and that's commonplace. And most times it's not like the owner is out there trying to make mistakes, right? No owner does that, but they can be guilty of loving the dog too much, and I don't really believe that, but that's just something to think about. That loving the dog too much is just simply not doing what is best for the dog. It's doing what you think is best for the dog. Well, that doesn't work real well around here with us. It's the dog first, and we'll go from there.
It's funny because what you're doing is you're talking around something that I think is real important that you make a big deal about on your website, and that is the relationship between the dog and the owner / handler. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe elaborate on what you just said?
Well, I think that, we live in a time where, buzzwords are important, and it's marketing, and, if you don't have some catchy phrases, then people don't remember you, and, and you're not different and all that other stuff. I just think the bottom line is that, it's much easier to force a dog to do something than to get a dog to want to do something, right? Because it's a dog. Your dogs, my dogs, are all the same. They're just dogs, and they don't think the way we think as much as we would like them to. So, we want to shape them into doing some behaviors. Well, that's not going to last if they don't trust you. It's that simple. And one of our catchy phrases, that we say, because we're bird dog people, is that when the dog is not on a bird, the dog works for us. That means the dog has to, do what it's supposed to do, cover the ground, stay in range, all these various tasks. But when the dog is on the bird, we work for the dog. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, at that point, the dog's in charge. Other than a safety issue, it's our job to stay with the dog, pay attention to the dog, watch the surroundings, all those miscellaneous things. Well, that's a relationship, right? We're each contributing something to the event. And that's what I want. Now there's downsides to that, Scott. There truly are. And there's opinions that go back and forth, and things swing on a pendulum all the time. But in our world, particularly in the spaniel world, the debate becomes, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Okay. And a dog that goes through a program where anybody can run the dog, right? The dog is so well trained, anybody can run the dog. Well, I'm just not interested in that, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's to me that means the dog doesn't care about me. Really, is how I view that. I mean, it cares about you as much as it cares about me. Well, you know what? I'm not interested in that. I already own a car, or a rake, a shovel that doesn't care about me. So, I mean, I want the dog that, we have a relationship, and that relationship has been built and developed over time. And the reason I say that there's a downside to that is because relationships are not as easily transferable. So we have to spend a lot of time with the people that we help, and they have to put a lot of time into it, because in most cases that dog and that owner, they're living through multiple relationships with each other, right? They're in the house, there's other members in the family, or when they come here for training, or if they're on the truck or we're campaigning them, I mean, let's face it, it's a pretty simple black and white relationship. This is their role, this is my role, and tomorrow it's going to be exactly the same. We're not having anyone over for Christmas, we're not going to have kids, right? We're not going to have all these things that interrupt the routine. Well, that's what I like about it. It's hard. It's really hard. So it's challenging.
Well, you said something, but by the way, I agree. I think it's a long process, and it's built on trust, and we're not saying anything that you haven't said before or I haven't felt before, but you mentioned that there is a point in the field when the dog is working for us, and then another point when the dog is working for himself. How do we recognize when that switch takes place?
Well, for us, the easiest, there's many facets, obviously, but, the easiest thing is what I said. When the dog is on a bird, he's in charge, unless it's a safety issue, right? Unless, you're going someplace to hunt and you can only be on this property and he wants to cross and it's, trespass, right? You got to stop the dog. So there are instances where you have to tell the dog you can't be in charge. But when the dog is on game, they're in charge. I mean, that's what we get the dog for, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they get the nose, they understand how to trail the birds and all those types of things. They're going to make the retrieve. So we have to trust and allow them to be in control, other than some certain situations.
Yeah. Well,
until we find the game, right? Until the dog finds game, then we're in charge, because the dog has no clue where we want to go. They don't know what hillside we want to go hunt, or we want to get down to this, right? I mean, those types of things. So it's not a case of we're just going to go follow the dog around. But, when the dog says, hey, I want to go up here, and we say, let's go down here, well, that the dog's got to trust you to be willing to give to that. Other than, the dog just gets forced to do it, and it's just complying to a command, as opposed to, okay, this sounds good, this has worked for us before, I trust you, let's go down here.
One of the things that I always talk about is we need to watch our dogs more carefully, more frequently and more carefully, so that we know when that handoff is going to take place. My particular wire hair, he when he gets into bird scent, his tail goes a mile a minute. It's a windshield wiper. Some Labradors, they do a little circle like a propeller. A cocker or a springer maybe does something else. Are there other indications that maybe somebody who's new to this world should watch for, that will help them understand when it's time to maybe defer to the dog?
So I do believe spaniels are one of the harder breeds to pick up on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a term, spaniel action, which essentially is everything you just talked about when the dog is on bird.
Uh-huh.
So the spaniels, just in nature, if they have spaniel action, we always hear, it always looks like they're birdie. And it can. I understand that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
But there will be some variations. But the only way to learn that is to get your dog on game.
Yeah.
And then so that you can differentiate for that particular dog the difference between, hot game, cold scent, or nothing going on type of thing. And that's just time and observing.
Yeah. Which, hey, who doesn't want more time in the field with their dog?
That's right. Put the gun down, let somebody else shoot, and just watch your dog.
Yeah. Boy, I'm glad to hear that. So I'm on the right track.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we've talked about all the breeds so far, but let's talk about those spaniels. Why do you settle on them? And what is it about them that keeps you a spaniel only kind of guy?
Well, I think that, there's that phrase, you look like your dog, or the dog takes after the owner. And, I think people probably can accuse me of being a little manic, a little type A, a little, and the spaniels can be. I mean, they're on the go, they're busy, the mind is constantly in flux, and that antsiness makes me smile, to be honest. Now, if that doesn't make you smile, or it makes you nervous, it can be very frustrating, and we go through that here. With Christina, my wife. I mean, there's dogs that we work with that just drive her nuts, and I love the dog. I mean, I just absolutely. I mean, this is my type of dog.
Yeah.
But I can also see that, like we've got this one dog that it just makes her nervous. I mean, he is 100% in every single thing that he does. So it can give the optic that he's hard to deal with, he's hard to handle, he never wants to listen, and it's just so far from the truth. But the outside optic, I can see why people would think that. Well, I like it. I like dogs that want to get after it and go to work. It makes my job easier than, not every dog is like that. That's the reality of it. Some dogs take more thoughtful manipulation of training to get them to go to work and try things and so forth. Not every dog wakes up every day and wants to go to work.
That's interesting you would say it that way, because I've never had one of those, but you see a lot of them, I'm sure. How do you motivate a dog that maybe isn't as passionate as you or the other dogs on your string? Is there something you can do to get, and this actually even translates to a young dog, for example, that hasn't had a lot of experience in the field on birds. What do you do to get them fired up?
Well, I don't view it so much as getting fired up, because I don't think it's healthy to try to change the dog's personality.
Okay.
I just think you're fighting genetics. I think there's a period of time where you're making assessments of the dogs. And then it's my job to find what's the best situation for that dog. It may be that dog should really live in the house. It may be that dog's fine in the kennel and can deal with the kennel stress. So I think that's what we should be doing with the dogs, and and helping owners understand what that is. But regardless of what that dog's personality is, all of the dogs we work with starting young, we put them through a series of yard exercises that, revolve around simple classical training, clicker and treat. And it doesn't matter what you're teaching them to do, just that they're learning to learn, and they're making mistakes. And, we give them cues, different words to tell them, nope, try again. That's a different word. That's a different thing than we're looking for. We'll try different behavior. And, so we're trying to build a willingness to keep trying. When you correct dogs, particularly young dogs, there's a tendency for them to quit trying and just wait for you to tell them what to do. Well, I don't like that. I like young dogs. I don't care how many mistakes they make. If they made 10 mistakes in a row, but they tried an 11th one, I'd be ecstatic, because that's a dog that you got a much better chance of training to a very high level, because the dog is willing to keep trying to get there.
In part and parcel to that has got to be when they finally do succeed. It's obvious that you're pleased with that. How do you manifest that when they finally get it on the 11th try?
They get a click.
Yeah. Okay.
They get, the click becomes important. It's just something about a click or sound that entices dogs, spaniels in particular, because they're very excitable. Cockers, nauseatingly excitable.
Yeah.
So, we use that to our advantage. If it was a violin sound that created a better atmosphere for them, that's the sound I would use. Simple box clicker is as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so, talked to George Hickox a couple weeks ago, and George is big on the clicker as well. Why don't you outline for people, how it works and why the clicker is better than us just actually saying, good dog.
I really struggle with trying to tell people what we do is better, to be honest. I'll just tell you why we do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Why it works for us. Well, the clicker, it's just a marker. It's marker training. It's not actually clicker training. It's marker training.
Okay.
So whether you use a clicker or you use a verbal word or you clap your hand, whatever it is, if you just consistently mark the behavior, and then they get a reward, well, then that behavior through classical conditioning, association, when they do that behavior, they then expect they're going to get a reward. And then they're more prone to replicate that behavior, right? So if they offer a different behavior and you ignore it, and they don't get anything out of it, then they're less likely to replicate that behavior because there's nothing in it for them.
You just opened my eyes to a greater degree on the, if they do it wrong, and I know I'm cutting with a blunt pair of scissors.
Sure, yeah, no worries.
When they don't get it right, the correction is really a non-action, a non-reward. Am I on the right track there, Todd?
The way we do it, initially we do absolutely nothing. So we're going to overload, because we use a clicker. So we do a bunch of table work. And when you think table, it's a table like for force breaking. But that's not our primary focus. We actually build rapport and so forth with the dog up there. So, we through a series of exercises, we get to the point where, let's say we're going to walk back and forth on the table, and when we stand still, the dog's going to hump or sit, right? We use the word. But it's going to do it on its own. And we're just going to overload the dog we're going to click and give it a treat and do it again and do it again and do it again. I don't care if the dog was at the other end of the table 20 feet away. If it sat down, it was going to get a click and I was going to rush down there and give it a treat. This isn't about sitting in front of me. Well, after a while, the dog makes the association that if it sits, it gets a treat. So it starts sitting on its own no matter where I am. Well, at that point, I can then start to introduce a verbal cue that the behavior of sitting isn't what I'm looking for. And through that, I can whittle I actually use the word wrong. We can whittle that behavior to where the dog is sitting exactly straight in front of us, not off to the side and so forth, by just incrementally having a higher demand of what type of sitting gets the treat. Okay, so we're just shaping behaviors is all we're doing.
Whew. Yeah, and it never ends, does it?
It never ends.
What are some of the most, what are the spaniel-centric, by the way, everybody, this is the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, the host. That's Todd Agnew, Craney Hill Kennels. If you want to learn more about his philosophy and all of his track record, go to spanieltraining.com. But Todd, so what are some of the unique spaniel skills that will help most of us who have a Flushing breed, for example, that you teach that maybe we don't do a very good job with?
Meaning as a trainer handler or characteristics of the dog?
Well, they probably both melded together.
Okay. Obedience.
Yeah.
I mean, no, myself included, nobody does enough obedience. Right? The whole point of a Flushing dog is to stay within gun range.
Yeah.
And the more they stay in gun range without us, yelling and whistling nonstop and so forth, obviously the more wild birds you're going to find.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if they're not in gun range, we can't shoot it. Well, when we go and hunt, that's very excitable for the dog. Obviously, or it should be. Well, what that means is that every one of our dogs, their obedience is going to be less perfect when we go to hunt than we're at home in the yard.
Yeah.
Okay, so a common thing that happens with us, I don't get it, but people seem to always want to comment about how well our dogs heal. Okay, and to me, this is, I so don't care if the dog heals, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
But they got to heal, and a lot of people we work with, they live in neighborhoods and so forth, and just for the safety of the dog, all I care is that the dog is generally around me and it doesn't go ruin the hunt. That's really all I care about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so we work on healing, and what people don't realize, particularly at a field trial, okay, as wonderful as our dogs heal, they're atrocious compared to how they are at home. So our dogs are no different than anybody else's. The only difference is that at home, our standard is higher.
Which allows for a little wiggle room when you go walk up to the line at a trial, I'm sure.
Right. That's right.
I'm trying.
So really, everybody's in a rush, right? That's normal. They got the dog. They want to get it out. They want to do the gun. They want to go hunt and all those other things. And I'm advocating for all of that.
Yeah.
However, there's only one chance to build the foundation.
Yeah.
Once it's botched and you go back to it, now you're dealing with more pressure on the dog, more corrections on the dog, and all those miscellaneous things. Well, it never comes out as good as if the foundation was done to begin with.
Easier to teach it right than to reteach it after you taught it wrong. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You mentioned range, and it is one of the perennial questions I get, particularly for pointing dogs. But in the flushing dog world, gun range is a relative term to some people. But define it, and then let's talk a little bit about how you encourage a dog to stay within gun range.
It is. That's an open-ended question for sure. I guess gun range really is dependent on how well you shoot. I mean, that's the
okay. 4 feet. Okay, for me.
Then right. Well, then you have a really close working flushing dog, right?
Yeah.
But the range should vary depending on what the wind is. And without getting too complicated, when you're going into the wind, the dog should run tighter to you, not as far down the field. And if you're running downwind, the wind's behind you, they should run much deeper down the field because they can't smell anything until they turn and come back towards you.
Sure.
Okay. And while they're coming towards you, you're going towards them. So that gap closes a whole lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you want to play with range, then you've got to give the dog an incentive of what that range would be. So, if the dog's obedience work is in place, then when you go out and train and you put birds out to train with, if you put all the birds out there 100 yards, it won't take too long for the dog to figure out the birds are down the field and they're going to start punching out on you. Well, now you got to correct the dog and all those miscellaneous things. So if instead you planted the birds tighter to you, a lot of people roll birds in when they're training. I mean, they're going, the dog's running, and they throw a bird on the ground in front of them. I don't do that. I don't agree with it. It's just not what I'm into.
Yeah.
I think it's very canned, and I think you end up getting a dog hunting like a maniac in front of your feet, but they're still not with you. They just happen to be close. But it works. I mean, the dog will stay closer. There's no question about that. So, just try to always, what's in it for the dog, and however you're working that dog, how can I set it up so that the dog says, hey, I'm going to do this because it works for me. Because that's really all the dog wants. I mean, it's, there's very little where the dog is actually looking to make you happy. I mean, that's, the dog is looking to make himself happy. And the more that we can shape that in a way that works for us, the easier it will be for both us and the dog.
Okay, so let's just put a capper on that. So you're not rolling birds in. What are you doing to keep those birds in close and the dog thus in close as well?
Well, the easiest way in modern training, I think, is some type of targeting drills. So, you cast the dog left and right to targets. And if you start to put rewards out there, then the dog has a vested interest to go to those targets. And if those targets are, X distance, repetitive nature, then that kind of becomes where they're used to finding game.
Okay, so target is another word for bird, and we're putting them out there.
Well, it could be, that people use buckets, they use place boards.
Okay,
There's lots of things to use. Of course, the bird would be the greatest reward,
Yeah.
right? Or it should be. um, but so you can do that, right? That's one way to do it. Some people use a check cord. I don't. Doesn't mean I never have. Doesn't mean I never will. But generally, that's not what we like to do because I don't like that resistance.
Sure.
But once dogs learn there are birds, and if you have a nice dog, meaning it likes birds, they're all going to try to yank you. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. So you just have to work harder on the obedience to make sure that dog is staying connected with you.
Love it. And we'll have more from Todd, Agnew, Craney Hill Kennels. Learn more at spanieltraining.com. This is the Upland Nation podcast. We've also got the Fix It segment coming up and our Fur Feathers Friends Word of the Week. Hang loose for just a moment, Todd. We'll be back to you after a brief commercial break. Hang on. And we are brought to you in part by HighVisSites.com. See what you've been missing? Watch the video I put together for them explaining how you actually got to see two things at once. Yeah, that's why we have two eyes. No, not really. But you'll get it if you watch the video. Your subconscious is looking at the muzzle because the fiber optic light pipe is there, but you're actually focusing your conscious brain on the flying birds. It's working for me. We were past shooting chukars, down in a really deep canyon last 3-4 days ago on this trip, and you just want to ride those birds, but you don't have to, because all you need to do is move, mount, shoot, and your head knows where the bird is, and your subconscious head knows where the muzzle is. Work for me, it'll work for you. Find out more at HighVisSites.com. And SageandBreaker.com is your source for all gun cleaning and gun care products, from expendables like their CLP, which I already used this morning after a dusty, warm hunt out here in Southeast California. But they've got a little bit of everything, including some new handgun cases. Everything has a lifetime warranty. This is the company that you go to when you want to buy heirloom quality gun care and gun transport products. Sign up for the mailing list and you won't miss out on future sales. It's all at sageandbreaker.com. Welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast. Scott Linden here. Todd Agnew, Craney Hill Kennels. There, spanieltraining.com is where you learn more about his track record. Todd, just tell me about the whole spaniel field trial game. I mean, in a nutshell, what is it that gets you so worked up about it? I mean, I've been to some, I've gone for some. It's exciting stuff, but you tell me how it feels.
I don't know. I'm probably not the best at that. It's it's a bunch of people running around with an ego, and we're all pretty proud of ourselves. I guess that's about what it comes down to.
Yeah, there is some of that, and especially at the levels that you are competing at. What do you think are some of the fundamental attributes that make you successful at it? What are you looking for in your own performance that helps a dog succeed?
Probably a calmness.
Yeah.
I guess it's probably no secret. I tell everyone we work with and anyone that'll listen. I pretty much pee my pants every time I go to the line. I mean, I'm like most people. It's not that I don't get nervous and so forth, but I'm probably give the outward perception anyways. I'm pretty calm out there and just going about our stuff, and that's because it carries through to the dogs, and we train in a fairly calm manner. And so if I get all antsy and excitable out there, dogs are probably going to misread that. And, it should be about the dogs. Let the dogs go do their thing. I don't think it should be about us. And, and get up every morning and go to work. It's that simple. And it's, My dad said years ago that, just remember you don't have to be good at anything, just keep showing up. And and there's a lot of truth to that, right? I mean, all of us are unhappy with customer service and everything else going on these days, and showing up on a regular basis, putting an effort forth goes a long way for sure.
Yeah, I can't argue that at all. I remember one of the first horseback trials I ran a dog in. The other handler was just so fired up. I finally attributed it later to performance anxiety. And sure enough, within about 90 seconds, that dog was picked up and out of there. We had a solo turn for the rest of the trial. It was wonderful. But it's hard if you don't have a lot of practice at it. And I'll belabor the point again, having been in the music business. Everybody's good in the practice room, but when you walk onto the stage, that's when the rubber meets the road. And if you haven't done enough of that, if you haven't done a lot of whatever it is, then you're going to have that anxiety. You've probably got a lot of great stories.
I think that, listen, it's competition, okay? And it should be competition. It better stay competition. It shouldn't be participation. It should be about the best dog, and not everybody can go home happy, and that's just the way it goes. And I think, unfortunately, what happens in all field trials is that, maybe some people want to get involved, and they're not cut out for that. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But, you don't need to badmouth it because it's not going your way. But if you want to be good, get used to disappointment. Mm-hmm. Because what comes around goes around. What goes around comes around. And so for every time that you think maybe you deserved more, if you stay in the game long enough, you're going to realize that there are days you got stuff that you didn't deserve. Right? It's just opinions of judges.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we signed up. Why are we complaining about that judge's opinion? We chose to go to that trial. It's not like you get there and then you find out who the judges are.
Yeah.
So, there's no reason to be whining about the judge. And you chose to go there. And they're human and they make mistakes. But usually the mistakes are just because we disagree with it. Did they really make a mistake, or is it just they called it differently than how we saw it?
Yeah.
But it's hard to stick with it because it does take a while to start realizing that you got a ribbon that maybe you didn't deserve. Okay. And then even when you start to realize that these things start to even out, it still remains very hard, much easier to remember when you thought you deserved more than when you got more than you deserved. Right? That's human nature.
Yeah. What would be the ultimate upside to a hunting dog owner to do something in the trial world? As you mentioned, not just a participation or a test to a standard, but mano a mano field trial. Well,
obviously it's going to require some type of internal ego to test themselves.
Sure.
Okay. It's clearly going to be the highest test of, your ability to either train the dog or work with somebody and then be able to, take over that dog and handle that dog in the trial. Mm-hmm. And, it's hard. It's really hard. If it wasn't, everybody would do it. The entries would be off the charts. It's hard. Okay. I think that if you are just a hunter, and I hate that term because I think that portrays looking your nose down at hunters, and I clearly don't. The hunters need the better dogs. There is no question about it. Hunters need the better dogs. But the only test out there for what the better dogs are the field trials. Mm-hmm. Every hunter thinks their dog's the best. And that's great. It should be. That's the way it should be. But, I don't want to offend anybody. Obviously, I'm in business. But the reality is, I'm not going to trust that your dog's the best because you told me it was. That's just, that's just, the way it goes. But when you compete on a regular basis against the other dogs, all subjectivity that goes into this, all good breaks, bad breaks, indifferent breaks, it all shakes out, and the top dogs in most cases rise to the top.
Well, there you go. Kind of hard to argue with, and absolutely have seen that. It manifests itself at every trial in one way or more. Let's switch gears just a bit. Todd, let's talk about hunting dogs and getting them ready for the season. Are you doing anything in particular to condition your dogs so that they are in the best shape they can be? For example, I'm looking at a 7-year-old wire hair who is sacked down on the couch. He's probably run 60 miles in the last 5 days, maybe 70 now that I think about it. He's pretty much all in. What do we do to keep our dogs in good shape so they can hunt a second day or third day or a fifth day?
Well, nutrition, obviously. And, I don't want to debate nutrition. So whoever you lean on for what you think good nutrition is, some foods are better than others. Big subjectivity there, but clearly good nutrition and proper recovery. Right? It's one thing. Most dogs can be on the couch the entire year, and unless they overheat, you can go out and hunt them for the morning. And if they're going to, sleep for the next week, you probably can do it again. But if you're going to do it day after day, 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row, then where they suffer is they don't have adequate time to recover. And so the better conditioning that the dog has as you lead up to the season, the quicker their body is able to recover. And there's different supplements and hydrations and so forth. No dogs drink enough, particularly in cold weather. It's a struggle to get them to drink enough. So you can bait their water or give them ice cubes or whatever. There's just some various things people can Google for that. But hydration is vitally important. But I'm not a huge supplement fan. I mean, the foods these days are so far superior to what they once were that, if you're feeding a quality food and you give your dog adequate conditioning, I don't think there's much need for supplements. The exception would be, some extra hydration and there is some of the glucose things to help them recover. There's a time frame that nature repairs it, and this accelerates that. After all these years of, guiding and hunting and trialing and seminars and all this other miscellaneous stuff, I just, we're human. So we like gadgets and trinkets and these other things. I think simple is a much better, plan. And so plan on getting your dog in shape beforehand, and make sure the dog's eating quality nutrition and well hydrated. That's the simplest way to keep the dog going. Yeah,
he's wagging his tail at your advice. That's all he can. That's all he can do now is muster up a tail wag. But
he'll be ready in the morning.
He better be. We found a new spring, and I'll tell you, out here in southeast California, what you got to find is water.
Yeah.
If you're not finding water, you're not finding quail. It's just amazing how direct that correlation is.
Same thing in Texas, right?
There you go.
1 year the quail lease is off the charts. The next year you can't find a bird.
That's why.
Same property, but it's just water.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about training our own dogs, or for the most part, hunting dogs. What is the biggest mistake we make when we're training a dog, a young dog in particular? Is there something we ignore or something we're doing wrong? Do you see it in your own clients?
Yeah, so globally, everybody's just in a rush.
Yeah.
Okay, they think the dog knows more than it does. So you do whatever exercise you're working on, and the dog does it right 3 or 4 or 5 times, and now you think the dog has it. And so now instead of asking the dog to sit in front of you, you start asking the dog to sit 10 feet in front of you. Trust me, the dog doesn't have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All you have to do is take the dog to your neighbor's property, and the dog will stop doing it. So, we make this leap because we're human, and we think if you're potty trained here, then you know to use the bathroom at the neighbor's house, right? Well, that's not how dogs think. So globally, just too much of a rush. But probably one of the things for the hunter is delivering birds seems to be a problem.
Yeah.
Dogs messing around or not wanting to give the bird up and so forth. And the biggest thing I would suggest is just set up your camera and film yourself with the dog retrieving bumpers or birds to you in the yard, and you'll be amazed overwhelmingly how much people are pulling the bird.
Pulling.
They're not waiting for the dog to release the bird.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the more you pull, the dog's going to want to pull back. All right. And so just magnify that after 500 bumper repetitions, how many times you potentially have taught the dog to pull back.
Yeah. It's just a variation on tug of war.
Yeah, and I'm not against tug of war with dogs. I think that's a fallacy.
Really?
No, absolutely not. Oh, absolutely. I think the gun dog people have had that wrong for a long, long time. And the reason I say that is because some of the protection dog people that, we've been involved with, why is it that they can play tug of war with every one of those dogs? And they do it for a reason, to build a prey drive.
Yeah.
But why is it that they can do that? And that dog will never damage somebody's arm. They'll release on command. Why is that possible?
Okay, yeah.
Right? The dogs have so much more control over their mouth than we understand. That, tug of war, to me, the benefit of tug of war is just building a relationship of, we're playing now the game's over.
Yeah. And so the key is make sure he understands the difference.
That's right. The reason that we don't show that, like at a seminar, or why we don't try to get our people to do that, is because I if you do it wrong, I do think it can be catastrophic.
Yeah.
But philosophically, I don't think there's anything wrong with playing tug of war. And I just went off on a tangent because we're talking about dogs pulling the bird. But dogs don't pull unless you're pulling, as a general rule, unless they've learned to do it. In tug of war, we're teaching the dog to pull even when I hold the object. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with the bird. If you teach the dog to pull at it because you're pulling it away, then the dog's going to grow up thinking that that's what the game is.
So is it a matter of just saying, having a different command or whatever for release? Or is it the fact that it's a bird and it's a training situation or a hunting situation? Or do you say, okay, now it's time to play tug of war or whatever it is? But we got to be disciplined, don't we?
That's right. You absolutely have to be disciplined. For us with the young dogs, when it comes to retrieving, now we're back talking about gun dog events, not tug of war playing games. Mm-hmm. But for the gun dog events, we don't have a command for them to give it up. When they're young, we just hold the bird very lightly, but we're just going to hold it. And if the dog pulls, we're not going to pull it back, but we're not going to let go of the bird. We're just going to wait. And there's very few dogs that don't get bored with that, open their mouth and release it.
It's funny, and I would only add to that, and that shows the dog you're not going to steal it immediately. It's just an object, and there's some thought, throw it again for the dog right away, and that's fine. Go ahead and do that. Doesn't I don't think it matters, but I don't think it hurts anything. So I think those things make us feel better, and that's great. But I just think being consistent is the way to go. But if you're consistently, a lot of times the dog brings it to you and it looks like they're going to let it go. And so, you have the bird, but when you start to stand up, you inevitably start pulling on it. Okay.
And they can feel that.
Oh, yeah.
Even if they only have a couple feathers in their mouth, they can feel that. So that's probably the biggest, other than, obedience stuff like we talked about, that's probably the biggest thing that I see, to be honest.
Let's switch gears, because the other most important thing, whether it's a spaniel or a pointer or anything else, is what we can loosely call steadiness. Now, in your world, steadiness is a dog that pushes a bird into the air and then sits down and waits. In my world, it's a dog that stands there, watches the bird fly away, and looks at me and says, "How come you missed again?" But most of us want some degree of steadiness so that we can make a safe shot, so that we're not boosting the second bird or the rest of the covey, whatever it is. What do we do with a dog that has a bird encounter and then somehow, some reason, thinks that's the time to start chasing.
Well, for the pointing dogs, okay, genetically they should be at worst hesitating anyway.
Yeah.
When they smell the bird.
Sure.
So then it's just extending that wait. Or with a spaniel, they actually, when they smell a bird, they should be accelerating.
Yeah, they should be crashing in on it. Yeah.
And so there's nothing genetic about them stopping, or there shouldn't be about them stopping. But then when you want them to sit, in the end, it's as simple as sit. And so if your dog, to me, if you tell me my dog is no longer steady, my point would be your dog doesn't know sit.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Or doesn't know whoa, or whatever the case may be. Now, granted, it is sit or whoa at a very excitable moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not saying this is the same thing as sitting on the porch with you. Okay? but the bottom line is it's an obedience item.
Yeah. So we got to work up to that. You mentioned, from the porch analogy to a flushing bobwhite covey, massive difference. We don't go from one to the other.
That's right. That's right.
So what are some of the interim steps?
Well, first the dog, keep it simple. First, dog has to know verbally what sit is,
Sure.
and then it needs to know what the whistle sit is. Okay,
Yeah,
then it needs to understand whatever your corrective mode is, picking the dog up, e-call or voice, whatever it is. So that way, when you correct the dog can complete the task as opposed to running back at you. I don't
Sure.
know what you're asking. Right. So now the dog has the basic understanding of what sit is. Then you need to be able to extend it where you can have the dog running around with no birds or anything and sitting at distance, whatever that distance is, so that the dog's not right next to you.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need to move from there, and the dog has to understand that when it sees something in the air, it has to sit. So typically you start to teach the dog as you toss a bumper that when he sees it in the air, you say sit. And then the dog starts to, sit when it sees something in the air. And then you got to do the same thing with the gun. So the dog's running around, and when you fire the gun, you say sit. And then after enough repetitions, the dog hears the gun and sits down, starts looking for what you threw. Then the dog has to understand that when it sits and you throw something and it lands, it can't go get it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're just making it incrementally more difficult. What I like to, tell the people that we're working with is if we were hunting, the dog's going to smell a bird. And when the dog puts the bird up in the air, then, a gun is going to go off. And then the bird is going to be hit or it's not going to be hit. So we want to train towards that same exact situation. So the first thing we have to do is teach the dog to sit when something goes up in the air. Then we have to teach the dog to stay sitting or to sit if it didn't see the bird when the gun goes off. Then we need to teach the dog to sit there when the gun goes, he puts it in the air, the gun goes off, but then the bird keeps flying, a flyaway, right? Missed bird.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then we need to teach the dog that it has to put the bird up in the air. It's got to sit down, even when the gun goes off, and then when the bird hits the ground, right? So there's an incremental, working methodology there.
And I asked you to explain that because I think what I want to ask you now is, this is not going to happen in 2 weeks.
Oh, no, not with us.
You're a pro. The rest of us are not. How long would that take for you? And then we'll multiply it by 4 and maybe get lucky.
Well, you won't have to because the answer I'm going to give you is almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Because we're going to start at 8 weeks of age.
Sure.
Because everything we're doing is leading up to that.
Yeah.
The actual drills that we go through that I just explained in a nutshell, it's going to be a month of just building those different associations before we then have them flush a bird and do it with live game.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So everything I explained, we're doing all that where we're throwing something.
Sure.
Okay. But that foundation has to be in place. And then when they go and they flush a bird and you say hup, it has more meaning than if you didn't do all that foundation.
Of course. Got it.
And then we're just going to do that. And typically, we'll take 50, 75 birds in a crate. We'll go out and we'll put a bird down and send the dog. He flushes it, sit, and the bird flies off. And we do it again and again and again. And after enough repetitions, when the dog flushes the bird, he starts sitting on his own. And when the dog does that, then we'll add the gun. Okay, and then we have to say sit again, sit again, sit again. After enough repetitions, he flushes the bird, he's sitting down on his own, and when the gun goes off, he still remains sitting.
There you go. It's a long process, and we need to do it in baby steps. And then everyone piles on top of the last one.
Well, then the problem with the flushing dogs is if you don't do it right, you'll make them start to hesitate. They'll start to hesitate going in on their birds.
Oh,
that's the flushing dog.
And so how do let's end on this note, because I'm really curious. I'm not a spaniel guy. I've worked with a lot of spaniels in a TV situation, so I don't get to ask all the dumb questions like I get to ask you, Todd Agnew, Craney Hill Kennels. Do you let them catch those birds?
We let them catch a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But we're making a judgment call. If I have a really high prey-driven dog, we're going to let them catch less.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of letting them catch them is to stay with that high driving flush.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to encourage the dog to not want to sit down when the bird gets away, right? So now if we've got, a dog that doesn't have as much prey drive, we're going to let them catch more of them because it's so important to maintain that driving flush.
Yeah, they want to think they can always catch a bird.
Yep.
Got it.
Because no flushing dog, no good flushing dog is trying to flush them for us. They're trying to catch them.
Yeah.
They're trying to catch them.
Yeah, got it. Well, good. And on that, I'm going to turn you loose. It's a long day for you. If I recall, you were on the road earlier today. Me, I had to go out and hunt quail. But learned a lot, and we'll do this again. We can't do it so infrequently. Todd Agnew, Craney Hill Kennels, spanieltraining.com is where you learn more about him. We've got more to come here on the Upland Nation podcast, the word of the week and a prize, and also the Fix It segment. We're going to keep your dog a little drier with an actual testimonial from Flick coming up on the Upland Nation podcast. Todd Agnew, thank you again. Have a great evening, and thanks for being a part of the Upland Nation podcast.
Thank you, Scotty. Have a good night.
You too. Yeah, so stick around. Got lots more to talk about here after a word from TrulockChokes.com. It's just mind-blowing to me how important chokes can become. I mentioned that we were pass shooting chuckers one morning, 3 or 4 days ago. That's worth a story in itself. I'll tell you that someday. But when you're taking those hard crossers at 35 yards up and 35 yards away, whatever that, I don't do the math. You need a pattern in your shotgun that doesn't have bird-sized holes. Chad Hodge worked with the folks at Trulock Chokes to come up with exactly that. His new Upland chokes are now in production. You heard Scott Trulock talking about them. They're precision-made, lifetime warranty, a satisfaction guarantee. If you're trying to put an extra bird in the bag, whether it's a pass shot chucker or a bobwhite quail down in South Georgia, well, it starts with a Trulock choke. Trulock, Trulock, TrulockChokes.com. And Todd and I talked a little bit about conditioning your dog, making sure that he could, should he get the chance, do like Flick and hunt 6 days in a row. It all comes down to nutrition. And I'll tell you, one of the things that happens after a dog is hunted that hard so frequently, they don't want to eat. Well, take it from Flick. He enjoys the taste of Purina Pro Plan Sport. That's all I can say. No, I've never tasted it, but I float it, and I often float it in warm water. It smells pretty good. I can understand. He loves the taste, and it's got everything he needs. 100% complete and balanced nutrition for a highly active dog like yours and mine. It's the brand that fuels the most sporting dog champions. They're in to win the game, and so are we out in the field every time we go. Learn more at ProPlanSport.com. sport.com. Well, Fix It is a practical bit of advice today based on experience back on that rainy/snowy, and then muddy chucker hunt of 3-4 days ago. Flick, he's too tired to give you the testimonial himself, so I'll have to deliver it for you. You got a wet dog, and my dog gets to ride up front with me once in a while. He rides in the back when Dave or Tom is riding with me. But even if he's riding in the kennel in the back of the truck, he's going to be more comfortable and better rested if he's dry. You got two choices and maybe more. Yeah, your wife's going to lend you the bad towels that she puts out when the in-laws come to visit. But remember those crazy ads, ShamWow, or even the real deal, a real chamois? Those things work. Keep it full size. Sometimes I cut them down for other uses, but you get some of those ShamWows, and you can find them everywhere now. And they will absorb more water off your dog faster. And the joy of it is you can wring them out and reuse them immediately and get even more water off your dog. Then wring them out again, hang them up, they'll dry faster. The joy of that stuff, whatever it is, I don't know what makes a ShamWow, but if you forget it in the back of the truck for a week, it's not going to mildew near as much as your wife's prize monogrammed bath towels. Yeah, keep your dog healthy, happy, dry, comfortable, and rested. Use some of those ShamWow type products instead of the usual bathroom towels. All right, it's time for our Fur Feathers Friends Word of the Week. Yeah. This month, I kind of made a mistake. Through the month of January, the monthly prize is a Sage and Breaker shotgun cleaning mat, $255 value. All you got to do is go to furfeathersfriends.com, scroll down to the bottom, fill out the form, add the word of the week. This week, e-collar. Your last chance at that cleaning mat, the word of the week, e-collar. Now, stay in touch. Enter often, because starting in March, we'll start collecting entries for the big prize, a 4-pack of pointer shotguns. Your choice, side by side or over and under in all the gauges, except that funny one, 16. Word of the week right now, e-collar, for your last chance at the cleaning mat. And Fix It has been brought to you by Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, talking to Dave Fiedler over there about some of the things we will learn at my next lesson. Whether it's a lesson you're looking for or a sub-gauge shotgun, they've got them both. All the instructors are hunters, and Dave and the crew have a line on some of the harder to find sub-gauge guns. If they don't have it in stock, they can get it. They can ship it anywhere. Start by talking to Dave and the crew about what you need as opposed to what you want in the field. He'll ask the right questions, and you will get started on the right foot. Learn more at midvalleyclays.com. Schedule a lesson. Start the purchase process, midvalleyclays.com. Well, thank you, Todd Agnew, Craney Hill Kennels, for all your advice. If you listeners would like to learn more about what he's doing and why he's doing it, go to spanieltraining.com. Got all sorts of educational components over there that you can get involved with. I thank you if you left a rating or a review at Apple Podcasts. That's the one that really counts, and it does help because that's how we grow. I thank all of our sponsors for their support: Sage and Breaker, Purina Pro Plan Sport, Mid-Valley Clays, Trulock Chokes, MidwayUSA.com, Pointer Shotguns, and High Viz Shooting Systems. Thank you for your support, and my next report will probably still be from down here, if the weather cooperates. I'm Scott Linden. Thanks for listening to the Upland Nation Podcast.